Welcome to Mom in Mind, where we dive into all aspects of perinatal mental health and wellness related to pregnancy, birth, loss, postpartum, and new parenthood. It's so much more than postpartum depression. We raise the volume on all of these topics in the hopes that someday everyone will have the support and info that they deserve before they need it. Please note this podcast is not a replacement for treatment by a professional or professional training. Welcome to Mom in Mind. I'm your host, Dr. Kat. How many of you went through postpartum depression or postpartum anxiety or any kind of perinatal mental health condition and didn't know that you were? How long did it take you to find out or to figure it out or for somebody to help you? This is such a common experience because in part, we don't know what to look for. We don't know what's going on for us until we know. For some people, that can be months. For some people, that can be years. Our guest today, Darcy Sauers, is going to be telling us about her experience of having postpartum depression but not knowing it for years. She, like many of us, suffered for a long time without knowing. And I'm really grateful to her for bringing her story to light because this is really common. This experience of suffering for so long and not knowing what's going on. She's going to tell us a little bit about her experience with postpartum depression, when she realized she'd been suffering, looking back and noticing the signs, and some of the things that might have prevented her from understanding what was going on or seeking support. And she's going to tell us about how her experience transformed her life. She became a postpartum doula after her experience. She goes by the Doula Darcy. Now she offers in-home postpartum doula services to the moms in her local area, as well as on-demand postpartum doula support, which is a super cool service that she provides. And this is for new moms everywhere so that you can get the help you need when you need it. She's also the co-host of Your Birth, Your Worth podcast. She had 3 babies in 4 years, and her experiences fueled her to quit her job in advertising and certify as a postpartum doula so she could help other women have a better experience than she did. Let's hear from Darcy. Welcome, Darcy. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much for having me, Dr. Kat.
I'm really grateful that you were coming on to share your experience, and in particular that it took you a little while to figure out what was going on, because I think it's so common that people suffer for quite some time without really understanding what's going on. So the more that we can kind of show what that might look like or what that might feel like, I think the more likely people will be able to pick up on, well, maybe this is something that's happening to me. And there's really no better way to do that than through personal story.
I agree totally.
Yeah. Great. So yeah, wherever you'd like to start about your experience, please share.
Oh, sure. So I am a postpartum doula now, but 15 years ago when I had my daughter, I was an advertising executive and had no knowledge of birth or babies or anything. But I got pregnant very easily, and I was just kind of like, the hormones kicked in, and I was like, this is all going to be fine. And I read a few books about birth, and, I thought, I've never really held a baby before, but these maternal instincts that I've always heard about will kick in when the baby's born, and we'll just all be fine. Mm-hmm. So not to go too much into detail of my birth story, but I really wanted a drug-free birth, really more from like an athletic standpoint. I wanted to just do it and say that I had done it. And, I kind of had this underlying notion that drugs weren't the best thing for my body. So I went into it hoping for a drug-free birth, and I did really well. I got, my labor went along great. Everybody was cheering me on, and then it was time to push. And I just pushed and pushed and pushed for hours, and she was stuck. And they gave me an epidural and said, maybe if you rest and relax, your pelvis will open a little bit more and she'll be able to get out. And so we did that. And then an hour later, I pushed for another hour, and she was still stuck. So the doctor was like, we really need to do a C-section. And that just gutted me. I was devastated, even though I hadn't really thought about it. But I felt like a failure as they were wheeling me into the operating room.
Gosh.
So she was born. Everything was great. She was healthy. Then a couple days later, they were like, okay, you can go home. And I panicked. I grabbed the nurse's arm and I was like, we cannot go home. We don't know what we're doing. You don't even understand. And she laughed and she's like, no, you'll be fine. And I was like, no, really, we're not going to be fine. And part of it was that I loved her so much. I was blown away by how much I loved her. And I thought I thought a more special baby had never been born. So I was like, you can't send her with us, two people that don't know what we're doing.
Yeah.
So we got home and then I ended up getting a fever of 102 and having to be readmitted to the hospital for an infection. And there was a whole thing of not managing my pain medication. So I was in a ton of pain. I felt sick.
Sure.
And I didn't know what I was doing. And my nipples were bleeding. Breastfeeding wasn't going well. And I just had this underlying nagging sense that I had failed. My body had failed. You know, the human female body is made to give birth and mine couldn't do it. So that was just kind of in the back of my head.
Right. Yeah.
And so, you know, as the days went on and my mom came to help and my husband was very supportive and great, but I just felt blah and wasn't really enjoying much of it. Then one day I remember, and she was a couple months old at this point, and I was loading my dishwasher and I was thinking about my own grandmother who had 4 babies, you know, way back when. And I thought, how did she do that? You know,
Right.
She didn't have a dishwasher. I don't think she had a washing machine. She didn't have a car. She had none of these, you know, modern technologies and appliances that I had. And I looked around my house at all the appliances I had, and I'm loading my dishwasher. And it was right then that my doctor's words came back to haunt me. You know, the day she was born, she meant to be nice. And in the moment, it really eased my mind. But she said, you know, there was no way this baby was going to get out of your pelvis, you know, no matter what you would have done. She said 100 years ago, you both would have died.
Oh, gosh.
So, you know, on the one hand, that kind of gave me permission to not feel like there was something else I could do. On the other hand, as I'm loading my dishwasher and feeling like a failure, I thought, well, maybe I should have died. Maybe I'm not cut out for this motherhood thing. And that's why it's not, you know, I just thought everybody else is so blissfully happy when their baby's born. And I'm just kind of chugging along. I was just going through the motions. And I remember getting cards in the mail and presents in the mail. And one in particular that said, it was from one of my like older, like great aunt. And it said, enjoy these days. These are the best days of your life. And I thought, oh my God, I'm like bleeding from every orifice of my body. I'm in pain. I have a fever. I feel miserable. Like this is the best. This is as good as it's going to get.
Right.
Like, I don't want to do this.
Right.
But it's like I can say these things now, but I wouldn't even really admit them to myself.
Yeah. This is you looking back.
Yes.
On all of this, not that it was so conscious for you then.
Right. You know, then when I was going through it, you know, I kind of was like, maybe if I take a nap, it'll get better. Maybe if she would just sleep better tonight, it'll be better. Or maybe if my mom could come, it'll be better tomorrow, you know, and it just like the days went on and on.
If I can say, I really appreciate you highlighting that part, because I think that is where a lot of this kind of us not recognizing stuff happens, that I can totally identify with what you're saying. I had that same experience of almost like you're talking yourself out of it, or that there's something that keeps nagging at you that like something's not quite right. But if you do these things, it'll just be better. And gosh, that could go on for a long time. Oh,
and it did. And, and I kept thinking, you know, and my hospital and provider, you know, gave me all the pamphlets on postpartum depression. But I thought, I don't have that. You know, I thought postpartum depression was what postpartum psychosis really is. You know, I did not want to harm my baby.
Right.
And I think I thought postpartum depression was like, you're so depressed you can't get out of bed and you can't meet your baby's needs and you can't meet your own needs. But I got out of bed every morning. I took a shower every day. I changed all her diapers. I fed her. You know, I did all the things.
Right.
So I thought, well, I don't have postpartum depression. So it never occurred to me to reach out for help. And it also never occurred to me to like whisper to a friend or my mom or my husband how I was really feeling, because I it was like there was this little piece of me that knew like this is wrong. Like good mothers don't feel this way or think this way. And then I had 2 more babies. I got pregnant really by surprise.
How long after?
Like a year after. So that my first 2 babies were 21 months apart. And it all just kind of continued. And I kept kind of playing my feelings up to sleep deprivation. And
yeah, that's another common.
Right. Or I'd think, oh, maybe I ate too much sugar yesterday and that, I'll try to be better today and that'll make my mood better. Things like that. Like you said, like trying to find the cause. And then when my son was like 2, I thought, you know what? The other thing was I grew up thinking I wanted like 8 kids. I loved the idea of a big family. But then after my first daughter was born, I was like, oh my God, I don't even know if I can take care of this baby. So anyway, after my second, I thought, you know what? All right, we're going to do this again. And this time I'm going to do it right. So, I thought this time we'll plan, I'll plan when I'm going to get pregnant and I'll really take good care of myself. And, so we did. We had our 3rd baby. So another thing was I had 3 C-sections in 4 years, which that alone, I mean, that is 3 huge surgeries to have back to back. So it wasn't until flash forward, I became a postpartum doula because I became obsessed with trying to help other women that were having babies.
You left your career.
Well, I left my career now, I consider because of postpartum anxiety. When it was time for me to go back to work, the thought of bringing my daughter to daycare just made me ill. And I was sure I had these horrible visions and notions. Like I knew if I send her to daycare, I'd go to pick her up one day and she'd be dead.
Oh no.
Which I know now is, I know. And I know now it's an obtrusive thought and intrusive thought, and a very normal thing that some women experience. But at the time I just thought, I don't know what I even thought.
Yeah. Okay. So at that point, your daughter was how old?
She was like 3 months old. So I was supposed to be going back to work and I just quit my job. And, my husband was like, you can't quit your job. You're going to burn a bridge. You'll never be able to go back. But he said, take as much time as you need. But everybody was like, you're crazy if you quit this wonderful job. But I couldn't. I literally couldn't.
Yeah.
So then I had 2 more babies. And then one day while I was trolling online, I learned what a postpartum doula was. And I was like, oh my gosh, that's what I need to do. So I went through the training, went to the certification and started working. And then one day went to like an extra workshop on postpartum depression. And as they were going through like the slideshow, it was shocking to see. I just thought, oh my God, I had postpartum depression.
Yeah.
They would put up these lists of like,
this is 4 years after your daughter's 4 at this time.
Yes. Yeah. And, they're saying, oh, if you're working with a mom who's experiencing 3 to 5 of this long list of symptoms, she might be depressed. And I was like, oh my God, I had every single one of the symptoms on the list. Right. And it was just so strange to look back and think, oh my gosh, I had postpartum depression. I had postpartum anxiety, And I tell all my clients now, it all would have been so different if I had hired a postpartum doula and she had just come into my living room and said, no, you're doing a great job. Everything here is fine and normal. And, the feelings that you're having, a lot of moms feel this way, and if she had given me some resources, it would have been a very different story. But I didn't seek out any of that help.
So in part, I mean, wow, that's a huge realization. And I want to hear about what happened after that in just a moment. But from that point,
it was kind of everything. It was a little bit of a relief, but it was also kind of mad that I didn't know. I didn't recognize the signs and I didn't reach out for help. I did go actually right around that same, well, no, it was actually even later. So even when I'm watching that presentation, I was like, well, I'm, 4 years out from having a baby. Like I'm not postpartum anymore. So I don't have postpartum depression. But I was still really struggling. And when my youngest was 2 was the first time I finally went to my primary care doctor and he was sitting in my lap and I just started bawling and told her everything. And she prescribed an antidepressant really low dose, and it made such a huge difference. And then I was kind of like, why didn't I do this all those years ago? It would have just made such a difference.
So your daughter's 2, you were pregnant with your second or just had your second?
When I went to the doctor,
Uh-huh.
I had my third, and he was 2.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, and he was 2 years old. So my daughter was 6 at this time.
Gosh.
So it was 6 years before I had got any help.
That's a long time.
It is. And now, like, the more the time goes by, the more I'm just kind of mad that I didn't get help sooner. But I honestly don't know if I would have, and every time I talk about this, and anytime like my own mom hears me talk about this, she gets so upset because she was very involved. She was so helpful. She was like my postpartum doula. She came over all the time and always helped with the kids. And she said, Darcy, I had no idea that you were going through this, that you felt this way. Like, I put on such a show.
Yeah. That mostly for itself, it's exhausting.
Oh, yes, it is. And I realized, like, it was kind of like I was putting on the show for myself.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It wasn't really that I was trying to impress anybody or do anything, but it was kind of like I was just constantly trying to convince myself ultimately that I was a good mom.
Right. Because the internal thoughts, the thoughts were that you were not a good mom.
Exactly. My thoughts were constantly like, just how can I lay down? How can I get all these babies set up so that I could just lay down? Mm-hmm. Or I also had this was another, like, one of the symptoms that I learned about in the seminar. I just constantly fantasized about just running away. I didn't want to hurt the kids, but I fantasized, I was like, maybe I could drop them off at my parents' house and just keep driving.
Right. Yeah.
Get in my car and just drive 10 states away. And I also used to fantasize about, like, maybe like my appendix would burst and I could go to the hospital and just rest for a few days. And everybody would, it was like you'd have permission to rest for a few days if your appendix blew up, but not if you're just a regular mom.
Right, because we can't just say, I'm exhausted, I'm going to lose it pretty soon. Like, you guys need to take care of these kids so I can rest.
Right. Yeah.
Like that, we're not allowed somehow.
Right.
So just ask for what we need.
Exactly, which is just normal. But in my head, having those thoughts and those cravings meant I didn't love my kids enough and I was a bad mom, which, it's just horrible.
Yeah. Yeah, a lot of what you're describing, that those 6 years, well, maybe 4 to 6 years of really trying to convince yourself out of how you're feeling, doing more than you probably had the energy to do to try and prove to yourself that you were okay. Yeah, and then the internal, so you're doing all of this stuff that's almost the opposite of how you feel.
Right.
Inside, you don't feel like you can do everything, right?
Yeah. Right.
Yeah. So you mentioned some of the thoughts that you had, that, like, I'm not a good mom, that sort of stuff. What other kinds of things was going on for you that nobody would have known about? Intrusive thoughts, you said?
Yep. The intrusive, scary thoughts, that I'd lose one of my kids in the parking lot and they'd get hit by a car. Getting hit by a car was a big thought. I'd be laying down, rubbing their back to go to sleep, and these horrible, horrible thoughts would come to mind.
About something bad happening to them.
Yes.
Primarily.
And
just to clarify for people who are just hearing about intrusive thoughts.
Yes.
Not that these are anything that you wanted to do. There was just like these involuntary thoughts would just come in, right?
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. And I'd be horrified that my brain, I'm glad you said that, because I was so horrified that my brain came up with that scenario. And, then because, again, I didn't think I had postpartum depression because I loved them so much.
Yeah.
These thoughts they made me physically ill, like thinking about it, thinking about anything bad happening to them was, it was just, it's gut wrenching for any parent. But then to strangely have your own mind popping these thoughts and visions into your head is really unnerving.
Yeah.
But again, a lot of moms have them. And so I think if I had just known a little bit, and I don't know so again, this was like 10, 15 years ago. I think there just wasn't as much information online.
Right.
or maybe I was just too tired to look around, but I didn't come across any of this.
I think too, part of the challenge, and still to this day, is that sometimes when we think that it's just us, there's just something wrong with us, it doesn't occur to us that we could look for answers sometimes, that maybe there are other people going through this. It feels so personal.
That's very true. I think you're right. Yeah. It wouldn't have occurred to me because I thought, what mother would ever feel this way? You know, my feelings were all really like just being bored and, you know, wanting a break and, you know, wanting to get away. And again, not leaving them in any harm.
Yeah.
But just honestly, the other thing is if I had just gotten a babysitter, like 5-10 hours a week, that would have been huge. But I've also had in my head that good moms are with their kids all the time. You know, you don't get a break. So.
Oh, right. Okay. I mean, that's another kind of common one that I hear too, that I'm supposed to be doing all of this.
Right.
And I'm supposed to be fine while I do all of this.
And I'm supposed to be blissfully happy and have lost all the pre-pregnancy weight. And,
oh gosh, you know, no pressure.
Right. Be smiling on Instagram. And, you know, I think social media, that wasn't for me because it really wasn't around yet. But I think now I really feel bad for moms now that have that like added awareness, or not awareness, but like that's coming into their consciousness, seeing all these Hollywood moms that are back on the set after a baby and things like that. And, or just, you know, what your friends and family choose to post.
Yeah. It all impacts us. So you really have highlighted a lot of different ways that you yourself were kind of prevented from seeing that you were suffering and made it hard for you to acknowledge or even think about getting help. So finally, I guess at 6 years, something made you talk to your doctor. She suggested an antidepressant. And then you started to feel better. Is that just kind of jumping back in where you?
Yep. Yeah. So that really did help me to feel better. And it just and I was really hesitant to take any medication because the kind of person I don't like to take a Tylenol when I have a headache. I just don't like taking medicine, not really for any reason. But so I just was really hesitant, but I was feeling so bad. So she gave me a very low dose and she said, this will take 2 weeks to work. And I remember like waking up on the second morning and I was like, oh, I feel better. And it was like, even my vision was better. Like just that dark fog was a little bit lifted. And so just being on the low dose, it gave me enough like, okay, I could go take a walk. I could go exercise today, which also helps your mood. Oh, I can go out. I think took away that exhaustion of always working to try to feel better. So it really kind of helped me do other things that, you know, naturally helped me feel better as well. And then I always say, you know, this whole time it was really then that I really started working as a postpartum doula, and every mom that I helped, even if it was just washing her dishes while she napped. That's amazing. That's not even that's like gold right there. I know. But when I first started, I was very clear. Like I did not tell my story. I did not tell my feelings. I did not tell my birth story. Like, you know, we're trained as doulas, let it be about the mom you're working with and don't ever share. And I really didn't. But like I said, just every time, for some reason, I couldn't get my own dishes in my own sink at home cleaned. But washing another new mom's dishes, it was so healing to just help other women along the way. And it was like over and over, every mom I visited, to hear them kind of starting to hint at saying things that I had been thinking made me realize like, oh my God, this is common and universal. And we have to all start talking about it more.
Right.
That, you know, motherhood is not this 24-hour a day bliss factory.
Right.
It's hard. And
it is hard.
Monotonous. And it's okay if you're not loving it every second.
Oh gosh. All of that would be so freeing for so many people to understand.
Oh yeah.
Just the pressure is enormous.
Yes.
In my mind, never higher.
Right. And what I've been talking a lot about lately is how it's always been hard to be a mom, but I think it is more so now than ever because we don't have communities like we used to. We used to have tribes and villages, or you lived on a big farm with your huge extended family, or even in the 50s and 60s, you lived on a cul-de-sac and there were a lot of stay-at-home moms who maybe they didn't come wash your dishes, but maybe you went and had coffee at their house, or they dropped off a lasagna, or, you had this social interaction.
Right.
And now women are just sent home alone, isolated, with no community. We also have no history and no shared knowledge we don't grow up watching our sisters and cousins and aunts breastfeed or care for their babies. We have no exposure. And then we're handed a newborn and expected to just go do it all.
Right. As if you're supposed to get this magical download of information.
Right.
When you're handed a baby. No.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm just thinking back on your story. You're sort of set up to feel like you're supposed to be doing all of this stuff and loving it, and that this is supposed to come easy. And so therefore the feelings that you're having are just about you.
Yes.
The negative feelings rather.
Right. Yeah. I was all just definitely thinking like, oh, this is just my fault. Like I'm doing something wrong. And I'd always have the thing, like I already mentioned, like, okay, tomorrow I'll try this. Like maybe I drank too much coffee in that, or, tomorrow I'll try this.
Yeah.
And
like a constant negotiation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
and I'm curious too. So this was all a lot for you, just kind of happening internally. And your mom said that she had no idea what was going on. And what about anyone around you? Were there any hints that anybody else picked up on?
No. My husband says the same thing. He's like, I didn't know. He's like, I thought you were, loving it all. And I think just between the fact that I had 3 babies in 4 years and that I kept, showing up. And the other thing was like, I didn't stay home. Like I went out, I did the story times and the breastfeeding support groups and, met friends for lunch. Like I was really active, trying to keep up.
Yeah.
And the other thing is I had a great group of new mom friends. When my first daughter was born, we got together every Friday and had breakfast, and we'd sit around at each other's houses for like hours at a time. And this is another thing I'm really grateful for. It was all really real, and we would talk about how tired we were or how, hard it was. But it was like, I never went over the edge and said, well, here's how I really feel. Like, I can't even imagine if I had gone to these groups and they were all talking about how blissfully happy they were. I think I was lucky to at least have some very real friendships, and I'm friends with them all still today. But even, I think they'd be shocked at the time to have known how I was feeling.
Yeah. Thank you for highlighting that, because it's true. If there is a mom's group where everyone's talking about how happy they are and how blissful they are, that's extremely isolating.
Yeah.
And also in the group that you had just enough of the kind of real talk about how hard things are to help you feel that support too. But there's just also that feeling like you'd never know if it's safe to say how you're really, really doing.
Right.
That's
and
hard.
I think it is hard. And I think it was ultimately because I wasn't really, truly admitting it to myself. Like, I'd have these thoughts and I just stuff them back down in like, no. Like, nope, I'm good. I'll just keep going.
Right.
So yeah, it never occurred to me to say anything to anybody because I really wasn't even saying anything to my own self.
Right. So given your experience, what would you like other moms and families to know about like detecting these signs and getting help?
I would like them to know, the true symptoms of postpartum depression. And, I think education is the key. Like I mentioned, I really thought postpartum depression was either you wanted to kill your baby or you couldn't get out of bed and, were ignoring your baby's crying, and none of which I wanted to do.
Right.
So I talk about any, couple that I meet with prenatally or, the moms and families that I work with, I always try to leave brochures and stuff and just talk about like, if you're not finding joy in some part of your day, like, yes, you're going to be bored And yes, it's monotonous and grueling, but, if you're not laughing anymore, if you're not, finding joy in other things that you used to do, then, reach out for help. And it's okay to reach out for help. I think just making it more, and I think this, I don't know if it's just because I'm working in this field now, but I feel like it is getting better. More people are talking about it and more providers are using the Edinburgh screening tool to screen for moms. It's not perfect yet, but I think it's definitely getting better.
Yeah.
And, more people are talking about it. So
yeah, I agree. I see the trend is there for people to be recognizing this more and more. And still, there's just so many more people who need to be reached. And so all of us, you doing what you do and just everyone raising their voices on this is so important. So in your transformation out of this postpartum depression and anxiety, you really shifted your life into being a doula. And now how do you support women and families?
So I kind of split my time between, going to a new mom's house and helping, hands-on help. And I always say 80% of the time that means taking care of the baby so that she can sleep, but also making sure, that she's eating good food and drinking enough water and, folding the laundry and tackling the dishes so that she can just focus on herself and the baby. But then I've also, and it's a lot of talking and a lot of listening and answering questions. And one thing I realized, and I had so many moms that would say, oh, I wish I could send you to my friend in such a state. And then I realized the questions and conversations that I have with new moms are so common. And I have a lot of the same conversations and answer the same questions over and over and over again. I finally have created a little package that I call on-demand postpartum doula support. And it's just 30 to 35 videos. They're all like 2 minutes long of me just answering, can I give my baby a pacifier? How do I know if my baby's getting enough milk? How can I help my baby sleep more? All those baby questions. And then also all the kind of mom emotional questions and things about physical recovery and stuff like that. And then there's always the option to click through, and you can also book a virtual online chat with me. And, I always say that sometimes just one in-person visit, me coming to your house, or one online chat, can be so helpful to just have someone hear your concerns, hear what's going on, and to tell you that you're doing fine, that everything's normal. I'm also a lactation counselor, so I always say, I oftentimes get these teary calls from a mom, and they say, my baby's crying all the time. I don't think they're getting enough food. I think something's wrong. Can you come over? And I'll come. And, after talking to the mom for 2 hours, I'm like, nope, you're good. This is all normal. This is all fine. And here's how to swaddle your baby, give a few tips, but just to see the relief on a mom's face that she's doing everything right is just amazing. And I also just have to give a plug to counseling. I think every new mom needs counseling. I always say, I think one of the reasons back when I was going through my own story, I thought, well, I don't want to go to counseling and have to go once a week, every week for years. But, I always tell moms, sometimes you go once or twice and they really help you.
Right. Yeah. It doesn't have to be a long, drawn out process.
It does not.
And certainly depending on the person's history and what's going on for them, sometimes it is better suited for them to have a longer term therapy, but not always.
Yes. Right. And it's, there's no harm in just trying it.
Yeah. 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 Thanks for giving that plug, because I think that one big part of this anyways is that mental health stigma. That, I can't admit that anything is wrong with me, or I have a weakness, or I can't do this, or that I need help, or if I go, that means I'm crazy. All these very damaging ideas we have about our mental health is an additional preventer of getting help.
Oh, absolutely. And it's a shame because, it's a game changer for so many people.
There is one other thing you do. You have your own podcast, Your Birth, Your Worth.
Yes.
Yeah. So do you talk about a lot of these topics there too?
We do. So I co-host that with a friend of mine who's a birth doula. And, there's a lot of podcasts about birth and postpartum, but we always try to look at everything through the lens of our feelings of worthiness and how, because our feelings of worthiness, one, affect how we give birth and how our postpartum experience goes. But then also, I think what happens during our births and postpartum period affects our feelings of worth. And it's just really fascinating. So the podcast is kind of us sharing stories, interviewing guests, and it's a great listen for anyone who's pregnant or has recently had a baby or works in the birth related field.
Sure.
So check it out.
That's awesome. Yep. You're getting out there. I love that. Supporting people however you can.
Yes.
I just really appreciate so much and can resonate so deeply with that your pain turned into your passion. And I thank you so much for doing what you're doing now, and hopefully, and I know actually helping a lot of people to not have to go through what you went through.
Yes. And it's been great. And, now I say, looking back, I'm glad for the way it all worked out, because I do the work that I do that I love every single day. If I hadn't had that experience, I'd still be sitting in my little cubicle at the advertising company. Right. So life is way better now.
Oh, that's beautiful.
I'm ultimately grateful.
Yeah. Well, I'm grateful to you for coming on and sharing all of this. And thank you for your time.
Thank you so much for having me.
You've decided to give your baby breast milk. We want to help. We're the Boob Group, a group of moms and experts here to support you in your goals, whether you're breastfeeding, pumping, or something in between. Each week, a group of experienced moms openly discuss their success, their struggles, and society's impact on how they feed their babies. We provide an honest, natural, and judgment-free approach to breastfeeding, pumping, milk sharing, and more. The Boob Group is part of the Parents on Demand network. Look for our free network app in Apple and Android to discover more great parenting shows and listen to your favorite episodes on the go.
If you would like to get connected to Darcy, you can go to thedouladarcy.com, where you can also find the connection to her on-demand postpartum doula support. You can find her on Facebook and Instagram, and then also check out her podcast, yourbirthyourworthpodcast.com. For those of you who are just joining us for the first time on the Mom and Mind podcast, please subscribe and share this as far and wide as you can so that all moms, families, whoever is impacted by perinatal mental health issues can have the information they deserve before they need it. So we can help prevent moms just like me and just like Darcy from having to go through all of this in the dark. So glad you could be with us. Until next time. Thank you so much for joining us today. Please share this podcast. Together we can support moms and families so that no one has to deal with this alone. Come connect with us at momandmind.com.